Everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another webinar. This time, we're going to continue our series Between Two Hats, continuing the theme of looking at images and our images solution and how we can improve and streamline image moderation. In the previous webinars, we have already went through the image filtering 101, and we also had an awesome webinar with our friends from PopGem, where we went through workflows and we understood a lot how they use the technology. This time, we would actually like to dive a little bit deeper and look into some technical aspects and how the technology actually works. In order to do that, we have two special guests today. So we have Stephen, our tech expert, and we also have Richard, our director of engineering. And as you may know, my name is Carlos, and I'm the director of community trust and safety here for Two Hat. So just before we jump in, I just wanted to anchor our thoughts a little bit, considering what we have established in our previous webinars in terms of the importance of filtering images. I think we have that very well established, and how that impacts the user experience in our products. If we don't filter images and we have perhaps a pornographic image or a gory image, that can have quite the impact on the user experience. And we know this leads to churn, and it will impact the user retention. So it's definitely a business crucial thing to have in place first and foremost, especially when you're thinking about scaling up a community. That said, I would like to first thank Stephen and Richard for joining us today. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So for the first question, it would be really nice to dig a little bit deeper, Stephen, into what are the types of images that the algorithm detects nowadays?
Sure. So the image detection technology in Two Hat is focused on threat-based images. So we're looking for images that would be considered not safe for your community, as opposed to doing general categorization labeling. So we're not trying to tell you that it's a picture of a cat or a dog or a mouse. What we're trying to do is give you the probability or a risk profile around each image matching certain threat categories. Those threat categories include things like pornographic content, graphic violence, illegal drugs, weapons, and extremism, such as extreme symbology or images relating to things like terrorism and those sorts of things, or other extreme groups. Now, what that does is it means that we can provide very accurate, we're very focused on what we're trying to achieve. We're not spread thin over every object in the world, and so we can give you very accurate results, but it also allows you to build very clear policies. The problem with labeling technologies is that when you get an image back, say for example, if we send it a picture of an ISIS flag, we're going to give you a probability that is a extremism image, and it will say 95%, 99% extremism. Whereas with a labeling technology, you're going to get things like flag, symbol, logo, graphic, those sorts of things, which are all true, but not very easy to build policy around in your workflows. So by being very focused on the images that you're actually interested in removing from your community or identifying, we can provide you really good accuracy, simple feedback loops that allow you to create great workflows.
Excellent. I really like this concept of being hyper-focused on detecting what is a threat, right? What is actually potentially detrimental to an online community, instead of looking all the possibilities there of all the objects, like you said. It's really well in line with our philosophy and what we have seen actually in both images and chat. That is that most users actually share very positive content, very innocuous content. So I really appreciate that hyper focus and how we are able to hone in and surface that to our clients and partners. I was wondering as well, like how accurate is the technology?
So there's been huge advancements, obviously, recently in image recognition and video recognition through the use of AI technologies. So obviously that is something that we utilize, which provides very good accuracy results. But the question of accuracy is always an interesting one, because if you start throwing figures around, they really are meaningless, because it all depends on what you're looking at. So if you are, for example, if you're trying to detect pornographic images, but all your non-pornographic content, all of your clean content is, social images, the number of false positives, the number of images that you incorrectly detect as matching the category you're looking for, will be higher than, for example, if you have a community that shares landscape images, because the features inside social images, which contain people, are a lot more similar to the content that you're looking for than, say, for example, in landscape images, which would be very easy to eliminate. So by throwing numbers around, you can, you're not always building a clear picture. What's really important is for you to determine what your rate of false positives is going to be based on the content that's common to your community and the images that they send. But what we do is we classify each image for each category into 4 risk buckets, and we can kind of define some guidelines, rates that you're going to detect for each of those buckets. So for example, at bucket level 5, which is mild technology, the mild bucket, where we're saying, is this obviously pornography, and therefore can we have a very small false positive footprint. So for example, in that bucket, if we would detect, say, 98% of the pornographic content, if we're taking the pornographic category as an example, along with that 98%, we're going to bring through probably about 0.3% of your legitimate content or false positives. So if you imagine the haystack that you're trying to work through as a human moderator, instead of having to deal with 100% of that haystack, you're having to deal with 0.3% of that haystack. So you've reduced it by over 99%. Along with that, you're going to get 98% of the needle that you're looking for, if you take that as an example. Now, that means you're missing 2% within that content. Now, if you increase that to the next level of the next bucket, which has got a higher aggression, we might be able to bring that up to detecting 99.5% of the content in your environment that matches that category. But along with that, our false positive rate, as we push towards 100% detection, will grow exponentially. So for example, we might have a false positive rate of around about 7% when we're trying to detect just that additional 1.5% of the content. To get it, we have to bring in a lot more content. But still, if you look at that at your overall moderation queues, even at 7% false positives, you've reduced the amount of content that your human moderator has to review by 93%, which is significant. So what that means is that you can determine what is going to work for your environment, because there is no one answer. It depends on your community's willingness to accept risk. So, for example, if you're willing to set 2% false positive, 2% of missed content to be managed by your community, then you can, reduce the amount of review that you have to do considerably. If you're, say, for example, you're dealing with children and you need to have a very low threshold, you may have to review more content, but you're still going to reduce it significantly over having no technology. The other important thing, just quickly to note, is that we are dealing with a situation where the technology is supporting and making your human moderation team more efficient.
Yeah.
It's not replacing them. It's just allowing them to deal with much larger amounts of content and getting them to review the content that is most high risk first.
Excellent. So what I get from this is we are, reducing the workload incredibly, right? And empowering that, what I call purposeful moderation, right? We actually put human eyes, which is precious time, into the right focus spot so things can be done much more efficiently. It's also interesting that we reduce the impact on humans as well, because nobody wants to keep looking at all those gory, super graphic images that are already being detected by the system, which is amazing. Something I really appreciate about the technology. And then we have that whole benefit, right, of not impacting users, not impacting your team, reducing the moderation workload, so saving costs, but also very importantly, we are not impacting the user experience and being able to benefit the user retention there. Thinking about a typical situation, right? Let's say there's a new company, maybe it's an app that share images, or maybe it's a game with profile pictures, and they want to get started. So once they've decided that they need to filter images, how does a client get started, Steven?
Well, the first thing to decide is, what is the content that you're trying to identify? You probably already have policies in place, and you probably have moderation workflows with your human moderation team if you're doing that. So there tends to be two types of customers and the way that they operate. Either they're reviewing all of the content manually with human moderators, which is of course very time consuming and not really scalable because they're concerned about that content going onto the site, or they are posting everything to the site and because they want to get it up there quickly, but then they're reviewing it post after it's on the site, or they're reviewing it if it's been alerted by their community. So the first thing to do is to determine what your false positive rate is for a particular category. So first of all, decide which categories you're interested in. Don't bother turning on categories that you're not interested in, because they will create additional queues. You want to just deal with the queues that are pertinent to what you're trying to identify and concerned about. Then you would want to run it on live data. The only way you're going to get a clear picture of how it's going to function in your environment is to run it on the data that's generated in your environment. And then you'll be able to see very clearly, hey, we can detect 98% of the bad stuff and our false positive rate is 0.1%. And now that's acceptable risk. That's acceptable. You might say that's acceptable loss for us, and create workflows around that are automated even. So you can say, we're going to eliminate 98% of the bad. Yes, there's a certain loss we're going to hit with that, but the advantage to us is worth it. That's a choice. That's a business choice that you make. And then the 2% that falls between 98 and 100, you may then choose to moderate that by passing that through to moderators to pick it up. So it does a number of things. First of all, you'll be able to set your policies based on your actual data and what you can expect. You'll be able to decide what policies you're going to pass through to your human moderation team, and what the real key benefit of machine-based detection is to create workflows, like automated workflows. So for example, you could automatically remove something from the site if it's got a really, really high probability, or you could add another kind of workflows like a challenge and response. So if someone tries to upload a piece of content that has got a real high probability of matching a particular threat category, you might say, hey, this may have breached our policy related to image content. Are you sure you want to upload this? So you actually push back, and hopefully they'll make the decision. So there's ways that through automation that you can improve things, and then it also will make your human moderation team able to handle a lot more content.
Excellent. I would also say for everybody who's watching right now, if you have already signed up for a cloud recording from our webinars, definitely check our previous one with the awesome folks at PopGem, because we went into details of how they use the technology, and I think it really goes into a great example of what Stephen was saying as well, how they determine what is a threat to their community, how they determine what's going to be post-moderated, what's going to be pre-moderated. So definitely something to check out there. And there's an awesome white paper that we sent out related to this. If you haven't received it, feel free to contact us and we'll provide this to you. Thank you very much, Stephen. I think that was very informational, very helpful. The next section now is actually we're going to talk to Richard here about integration. Like, how do we go about integrating the technology? So, Richard, I was wondering if you can tell us and walk us through a typical product integration, please.
Sure, absolutely. But Carlos, I just have to say one thing, that there is no typical integration. Like, there is no one size fits all, really. Back in August, I had the opportunity to actually walk a game developer, like one of their engineers, through an integration, and end to end, it took us about 30 minutes to set up. So from no code to their system integrated was about 30 minutes. Now, that is the most very basic of all integrations possible, but it was quick and it was easy. Really, it comes down to how tightly coupled does the customer want to be with us. So there's a number of features within our platform to make it very configurable and to provide lots of rich features and functionalities back to that integrating customer. But it really depends on their level of desire to implement that data within their own system. So the short and long of it is it can be 30 minutes or it can be, the sky's the limit. It all depends on the level of integration that they want to get involved with us in. Really, I think where a lot of the non-engineering time gets put is in tuning the system for that specific client. If you want to think of in terms of games, like what is the game terminology that we want users to be able to use and still have freedom of expression but still keep the community safe. So that really comes into the integration place where our client success team works with that client to ensure that, we're tuning the system to ensure a good risk level and a low false positive rate.
Got it. So from a technical standpoint, when we're talking about getting up and running, there is a good simplicity there in terms of connecting the dots. When we actually consider how are we going to define and really marry those policies with the actual filtering of the images? How are we going to do the different workflows? That's something that needs to be honed in, usually between the community team and our client success team, right? And actually getting to that really good, optimal workflow in the end.
Absolutely. The engineering piece is really easy, at least from an engineer's perspective. I think the more complicated piece is in the people, right? Investing the time with the moderation team to make sure that the system works for them.
Makes sense. In terms of a question that's very common, we hear it a lot. Usually folks want to know how many requests per second can I make, right? There is that worry of we're going to scale, we're going to grow so fast, and how fast can I hit the system? And that's one, but the other one too is latency. So I was wondering if you could also touch on those 2 points for us, please.
Sure, absolutely. So let's start with requests per second. So our system has been load tested at various volumes. Really, the system is really highly elastic. So as our endpoints see more and more traffic coming in, we just scale up more and more available resources. So we can pretty much hit whatever kind of request rate that a client is interested in, given certain guidelines. Like, obviously, you can't go from 0 to 100,000 requests per second because there's servers have to still turn on, right? So there is kind of a scaling guide that we work with clients to try and match. And that's just for affordability, right? If we have thousands of servers turned on, it's just going to be more expensive. Whereas most clients are interested in something that's more financially viable, and that's kind of tuning traffic to peaks throughout their day. So good example is a integration we did recently. The customer was concerned that on go live day, right, they launched their game, that they're going to have a ton of traffic. So we did the basic math and we figured out what that scale point would be, and we pre-deployed the servers to that level. And then over the next few days and weeks, as we saw their traffic, what the real traffic was going to be, we were able to then fine-tune the environments to grow and contract with what their actual traffic patterns were. And that just makes it more financially viable for the customer. So that's kind of RPS. Latency is a different variable in the formula. So if we're talking about images, it's the biggest piece of that variable for latency is, are we receiving the URL or the actual binary of the image? So if you think about it in terms of its transfer rate, right? So if someone is sending us the binary, we have all the data we need now to make the classification. If they're sending us the URL, we have to go out and get it. And then so there's the out and back time, but there's also the how fast is that source able to send us the image? And so it's really constrained on the other end, not on our end. So that's kind of the biggest variable in terms of images. And then video is kind of the same thing, right? So we have to go out and get the video, and then we have to look at, well, what's the sampling rate? Like, how concerned are we that there's bad content hidden in this video? And that's kind of the sampling rate. So maybe we're taking one frame every second, or one frame every half a second. Well, how big's the video? Like, how often are we chopping the video up? And then each one of those becomes an analysis on frames. So it all comes down to, how fast is that target source able to send us the data, and then how much data are we actually trying to push through the pipe?
It's great that there are options, right? So folks can really choose the option that will be more optimal for them. And also interesting is same theme here as well, right? When you're talking about videos, like how detailed do you want to be? How many frames actually do you want to look at? And what is your comfort level and your threshold, and how much are you willing to put up with in terms of risk, and how you're going to structure the whole thing. So it's nice to know that there is so much flexibility.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. We reached the point now of questions and answers. So it would be great to hear your questions. Any questions that you might have for Richard or for Stephen as well. It would be great to hear them now.
It's nothing. Yeah, I have a question. I'm the webinar elf who's kind of in the corner here. So yeah. And I wanted to ask, one of the topics that's come up quite a bit recently that we've been talking about here is child pornography, which is known as child sexual abuse material. Yeah. Do you currently scan for that?
Sure, I can take that one. So the answer is right now in production, we have a very good pornography detector. It is not specifically tuned for child pornography, though we have that classifier coming. So we actually have a research division of our company that's currently focused on child pornography. And so they are actually tuning a detector specifically for that. And it should be available in production in the next few weeks to a month.
It's important to note that they're working with law enforcement as well.
Yes. Yeah, we're not using our own content. Thank you, Stephen. That is a very good point. That we have actually worked in conjunction with law enforcement to be able to train detectors for that specific content.
Excellent. I have a question actually for Stephen here, to just, if you can add any points to video, Stephen, because we get a lot of questions about videos. So I was wondering if we talked about the frames and getting like as much as you want there. Is there any other insight or detail you could give to us regarding videos?
Yeah, sure. So with video, it really depends on what you're trying to detect. Once again, like for example, if you're trying to detect, say, pornographic videos where, 70% of the content in that video is likely to be inappropriate, then you can take a very low frame rate. You may only need to take, regardless of how long the video is, whether it's 1 minute long or 10 minutes long, you may only need to take 10 or 15 samples from that video to identify it, because all of those samples are going to come back as positive, because the majority of the content of the video matches that category that you're looking for. It becomes more challenging when you're, say, for example, trying to look for a steamy scene inside Game of Thrones, where most of the video content is legitimate, or doesn't match the content that you're looking for, and so you need to take more frequent samples in order to identify the scenes, the short sections of video that match that category. So now, when you do that, you obviously are increasing the resource requirement in order to analyze that video. Say, for example, you were taking 1 frame a second, that's 60 frames over a 1 minute, 60 images over a 1 minute video. Whereas, if you're only taking 10 samples over a 10-minute video, that is very, very quick. What we have identified, when the majority of the content matches the category that you're looking for, say, for example, pornographic video clips, you only need to take a very small sample to have a very good detection rate. Increasing the samples of something that doesn't actually improve it that much unless some of that video doesn't match the content that you're looking for. The other thing to note is we are quite smart in the way that we go grab the video. We don't download the entire video. We only download the fragments of the video that we require to do the analysis. So, if you have a 10-minute video, but you're only taking 10 samples from that video, then you're probably looking around about 30 seconds of data that we're actually downloading, because we're only downloading the samples.
Okay. One more question? All right, so it seems like we have space for one more question here. Thank you, Steven. If anybody has a question, this will be good. Otherwise, I'll fire one extra one for us here. All right. There's a question that we also get quite a lot, and then this might be a good question for Richard. It is regarding text over images, Richard. Is there anything you could tell us about this?
Sure, absolutely. So we actually have I guess the name for it currently is an ensemble detector. So when actually our multimedia endpoint receives a classification request, it actually sends that request out to multiple systems for analysis. And so one of them is an OCR technology that will look for text over top of the image. And so the annotated response that the customer will get back is a classification on the image along with the OCR classification. So say it's an image of a park, and then on the park it's like, my phone number is 1 2 3 4 5 6, right? And so the actual response coming back would be that it's 0% chance of pornography and 0% chance of all the high threat categories, but it's PII because it contains someone's phone number in the actual text. So we've kind of blended together image analysis and text analysis into that response.
Excellent. So we get to also leverage our text classification and filtering, which it's again another great example of how PopJam and the great folks at Super Awesome use our system. They leverage a multi-dimensional analysis, right, of that user. What are they writing? What are they posting in terms of images? What's their history overall? It's really smart to think that way. So you have different data points to inform your decision. It's great that we can leverage both. Excellent. So we reached the end of our webinar. I wanted to thank both of you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Steven, very much for joining us, for your expertise and knowledge. And thank you, everyone, for watching too. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of things to consider. One is, if you would like to actually have more information about our image solution or text, definitely contact us for a demo. We would be happy to. Our team will definitely be able to help you with that. And also, we have an upcoming webinar in October. It's October 24th, and it's Chat Moderation 101. So now we'll transition into actually focusing on text and chat moderation and exploring that, which is something that we have done for many, many years, and we have a lot of clients using our text moderation. So we'll be able to talk about best practices and how that ultimately affects your business in a positive way and helps you have better user experience and retention and growth in your community. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again.
Thank you.
Oh, and I just wanted to say if you guys have any closing thoughts here before we go, Richard and Stephen.
I guess the key thing here is that there's been a huge shift in what is possible in recent years with the advent of AI, and this is going to enable you to achieve more than deal with larger communities, keep your communities safer than ever you've been able to do in the past, and that's a good thing. Overall, you want to make sure that your community is a safe environment where people can feel safe. And the other key thing is that you want to have really good visibility as to what's going on. You don't want to have a big black hole of we think we're okay. You want to be in a situation where you know you're okay and you know exactly the type of risk that's out there inside your digital community, and with the combination of our technologies and your human moderation team, you can very much achieve that now.
Excellent. I like how we summarize this into 3 R's, and we say the user retention and how we impact that, but risk mitigation, like you're saying, Stephen, like what is going on in the community, you want to mitigate that risk. And also you talked very well today about cost reduction and how that reduction in workload is quite substantial. So those are 3 things to definitely keep in mind. All right, and any final words, Richard?
Sure, I'll say one closing thought here. So Two Hat Security Corporation is really at its heart a research company. The more and more partners we get and are able to analyze their data, the more our AI and deep learning classifiers are able to learn from those data patterns. So as time goes on and as our partnerships grow, our ability to classify high-risk content is just going to get better and better. So stay tuned to what comes next.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next time.